Hello and welcome once again to episode 64 of Code Completion. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
So before we get into our main topic, we are officially recording in 2022. Spencer, how was your new year?
Yeah, it was good. Took a break from work, so that was nice, and it's been a week back from work now, and it was a good week. It was nice to kind of have a break and unwind and jump back into things. We've got kind of a new plan as far as managing tickets and everything at work it goes. So like everything feels a bit more cohesive, and life is good. So how about yourself?
A good start to the new year then.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, for me, it's been good. I did not take a break, so to say, but I did spend all of the end of the year and the beginning of this year hunkering down on algorithms, and specifically algorithms that I need to solve a specific thing on the app that I'm working on. So my brain has been hurting, to say the least.
So basically, the opposite of what happened with me.
Yeah, the opposite. I will refresh sometime mid-year. That will be my refresh cycle, because at the moment my brain is just spiraling. Every waking moment, sleep is thinking of oh, how can I solve this in a slightly better way and improve it. So thankfully the problem has been solved before, meaning I wrote an algorithm that does technically work. It just crashes sometimes, and that's no good. So I'm rewriting it completely from scratch with a very different set of assumptions in place, sprinkling in some async await and actors, because why not? And then spending 3 weeks spinning my wheels trying to figure it all out. So always fun when that happens.
Nice.
It's the trappings of development, right? You want to solve something better and get the nice shiny solution and be proud of it, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes it just kicks your butt. There's no way around it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure whatever it is you're working on is plenty hard in and of itself, and then trying to, make it as perfect as it can be is then even more of a challenge after that. So
I think the worst part about it is it's deceptively simple. Oh, I have a list of changes that have been made somewhere, and I want to animate those in a collection view. And sequencing those changes in a way that the collection view is happy is not the order that they were made in, if that makes sense. Completely asynchronously. And my previous solution kind of relied on the run loop, and that worked fine because it could do all the processing, sorting, filtering that it needed to do on spare run loop cycles. But that worked if you had one collection view that you were showing. If you had multiple on screen at the same time, they're all kind of competing for that main run loop time, and that's kind of where it fell apart. So I'm trying to bring it to the modern Swift async await kind of architecture with actors, where every component is an actor that kind of can do its work asynchronously, and then let the UI, the main actor, the UI thread, basically pull it whenever it's good to go. And it says, hey, I'm good to make some changes. Let me know what changed in between. So now I have to sequence things in this very different way. And that's where it's really scrambling my brain for good. I really feel that I'm not 20 anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So is it using difficult data sources to for the collection?
No, not at all.
Themselves? No? Oh, okay.
No. So we are dealing with a data set that is well in the 100,000 entries. So I don't want to just take 2 snapshots of that and say, hey, find the difference for me. That sounds like a horrible idea. So if I know, okay, there have been 10 changes since we've last kind of looked at it, since the last animation, I should be able to sequence those and tell the collection view, hey, insert these 3 things, move these 4 things, and delete these 3 things. And that should be fairly instant from an algorithmic point of view. It's just if you needed to... So a little background, the collection view wants your deletes to happen before the inserts. And it's just, that's how they've kind of settled on it. And same for difficult data sources and all of that. So deletes happen before inserts. But if you insert something and then you delete something, now you need to either modify the deletion index or modify the insertion index because you want the delete to happen before it. So that's where most of the headaches come. There's some considerations to take into account for insertions as well. And then all of this kind of gets extra crazy if you don't want a model where you just have sections and items, but you want a complete hierarchy where you can have items and items and items. And collection view kind of just falls apart unless you wanted to magically say, hey, system, take care of it for me with default data sources. But that just sounded like a bad idea from the assumptions that we have for the product. So that's why I'm kind of hunkering down on the low level, kind of preparing the data ahead of time. Probably not going to use a collection view in the end because hierarchies. So yeah, that's going to be interesting, but that's a completely different set of problems.
Well, it sounds like you have your work cut out for you, to say the least.
Definitely do. That's not an understatement. So for our main topic today, we wanted to discuss what the different things you could do as an app developer to market the app that you build, because oftentimes people see that as a finish line, like, hey, you're finishing your product that's kind of good to go. But that is just the beginning, right? If you want people to use your app, you have to put in a whole lot more effort to kind of have it be a thing. It's not like the early days of the App Store where you were one of the first 5,000 apps and people could kind of like browse and find it and be happy. There's a lot of considerations that you need to make for it to be fully like present in that sense. So what is the easiest thing you could do, Spencer, to have your app be marketed effectively?
Yeah, I'd say probably the easiest thing that I can think of is like just posting it out to, Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever social media you have. It's a free and easy way to engage with people that probably, if you've kind of been cultivating followers following other people, you're probably going to reach a decent target audience just by way of them like a fair amount most likely being kind of in the same space as you. I mean, not all of my followers are in the same space, and that's fine. But you've got, I suppose somewhat of a targeted audience for free in that sense, where you're it literally is free. You just tweet about it or post about it and it's done. I think it really depends. There are so many different ways that you can market your app in general. And I think it depends on what is the goal of your app, right? Like coming from our background as instructors at Lambda School, we would have students try to put apps on the App Store just to say that they've put an app on the App Store and be able to show potential employers. And maybe that's all they need to do. And, a tweet suffices. Or if you're trying to make a business out of it, then, you need to think about, okay, well, tweeting about it's great, but how can you go the next level and start to reach a broader audience and get people downloading and using your app? Because ultimately, whether it's free, whether it's, got ads, or whether you're paying for it up front, it's got in-app purchases, whatever, you need to get users for the app. And so this whole concept of marketing is great. So I think tweeting is probably the easiest thing, but it can only take you so far unless you are, Steve Trotton-Smith and you've got hundreds of thousands of followers. And even then, there's a limit, but it's a higher ceiling for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, most people probably start off with like tens, maybe 100 or so followers. And if you're like, okay, I just made my app, let me sign up for a Twitter account. It's a little too late, but you should still do it.
You should do it, yeah.
But it's not going to have like an immediate return for like the audience that you're trying to get, right? One easy thing that you can do is also to post to Product Hunt. That is one of the few places where you have no one following you, but you can still kind of put it on there, and people will see it because every day there's a new list of products basically that people can go ahead and check out. So you have a decent chance with that. And you also have a decent chance with various subreddits. So if you want to go the Reddit route, make an account first, join the communities that you plan on posting to, learn their rules, and like be prepared to get immediately shut down because people are like cranky on there and they don't want you posting like more than once every 5 years or something like that. It's really a pain, to say the least, but it is a great avenue to get a tons of people seeing the creation that you just made. So as far as like a first launch, you should definitely like do a little bit of planning so that way you can get as big a wave as possible. Because if you've ever done any research as far as like how do apps do post launch, they don't do great. There's that initial like giant wave of like first day installs, and then there's a 10% of that wave of like your version 1.1, and everything in between is like at the rock bottom of like installs. So if at the rock bottom is a sustainable number for you, then you've kind of made it. But for many, it's like one download every week, and that's not like a great place to be, especially once you put 6 months into building something that you're really proud of, right?
Yeah, for sure. Another one that is cool, and I've not personally done this, but I know I don't know if you've done it, and maybe you could talk about this a little bit more, but I think a really interesting one is going to publications like 9to5Mac or I don't know other ones. What does Guy write for? Is it 9to5Mac?
9to5Mac, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's the one I can think of that will highlight apps from time to time. And that's, to me, a really interesting one where you just kind of reach out to the publications. And again, you probably know more about this than me, whether it's through Twitter, whether it's through the writers themselves on Twitter, or you email 9to5Mac directly. But going that route, if you've got an interesting enough app that they'll be willing to cover it, maybe you've made a press kit already with assets so they can just kind of readily throw it on there or whatever, is a really interesting way to kind of get traction. And kind of on that topic, I remember that I'm kind of not remembering this 100% right, but there was a recent article posted about the company I work for and kind of how they got started and how LumaFusion got traction. And if I remember right, they kind of credited a lot of traction to being posted in a publication like that. So there's definitely, that's a good way to reach, again, a good targeted audience where, I don't know if you really have to pay for that, if they make you say, or if they say, hey, pay us $500 and we'll feature this, or if it's just kind of, we think this is interesting, we'll talk about it.
So I do have some insight on that. It tends to be a mutual benefit to both the publication and yourself for them to publish a story, because they are always looking for stories to publish. Now that's the key point. They're looking for stories to publish, not products to publish. Sure. They want to hear about why you made a piece of software, what problems you're solving, and what ways that their readers could benefit from your software, right? They don't want to just give out free advertising for an app, and most cases they're going to ignore you if you kind of just say like, hey, I made a thing that counts your steps, and like it's been done before. They're not super interested in that. Why is it interesting? Like, what is interesting about your app in how it counts steps that they would be interested in sharing? So for publications, do your research for seeing which writers in each publication are the ones that tend to write about apps, because they're going to be your best bet, basically. Most publications have emails for all their writers that are easily findable, or like if you look up the Twitter accounts for those writers, they will have an email directly there. Oftentimes they will be happy to feature like new apps from indies, because that's kind of what keeps the platform healthy is new people coming in. Other times they don't care at all. So you need to do a lot of research to find who to contact them well in advance, give them at least like 2 weeks to write the article. Like, don't just say like, hey, I'm launching this yesterday. Like that might work, but it's not going to have the most benefit for you. Now that might be a benefit if you're planning like an update and you want to market that, like say, hey, I'm planning this big update. Here are the changes. But as you said, Spencer, you want to prepare a press kit that has a whole bunch of assets that they can use in the article. You want to have a story that is something that they can empathize with, and build upon to kind of write about. And you want to have like a link or a code that they can go ahead and download and play with the app and see what the whole hubbub is about. So if you do that effectively, you can get 1, 2, 3 written publications like all at once when your app launches, and that can kind of help make that wave bigger and last longer, because a publication stays up for a week or so it might last longer. In addition to that, like if you search Google for your app, that publication will show up and people can read about it, and that's going to help you down the line as well. So that's a definitely a very important piece of the puzzle, but you need to have all your ducks in the row for it to work well and for you not to be ignored, because they don't need your app to like have a story to write about. Similarly, you don't want to have something that's going to come out at the same time that Apple is having a keynote, because that's more important, more interesting news. That said, they might still be interested because it's different news. Like, okay, we have a single thing that's not Apple's keynote, so they might be interested in it. So the best thing to do is ask, but every time I've asked, the most important thing is always have a story to tell, because that is the most interesting. And sometimes that story might not be about your app. Maybe it might be like, hey, you are doing something with your parents, and that was like a mother-son project that you wanted to kind of build up. That's an interesting like little snippet about the evolution of your app. Maybe you had a dev diary along the way, and it kind of showed how it was put together. Or, as I saw in the news cycle this week, maybe you were the first person to write an app using the Swift Playgrounds on iPad. Yes, your app's not amazing, but that's not the important thing. It's the fact that you went through the trials and tribulations of launching an app through a super limited and constrained environment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a cool thing that the playgrounds are at that point. That's super exciting. Kind of going back to what you were saying with, being able to Google your app and having it show up is like, and this is one thing that I did with the first app that I put out, that it's not even on the App Store anymore. But like, I was super new. I had just, graduated from a boot camp. I didn't really know the space very well. And so I set up like a Squarespace website, because I wasn't a web developer, and I kind of went through that whole thing, and paid $200 or something for a year of the Squarespace website, which in hindsight is to me not worth it, but it was kind of cool to see like analytics and stuff. And so something also that I guess on my side, I've probably talked about this before, but I'm so disinterested in like the business side of app development. Like, I just want to write code. I don't really want to make a whole business out of it, and that's just me. So, thinking about like, how can I market myself? That was always something that I didn't really pay much attention to, and I was never really trying to make money off of it. But like, what can you do as far as like optimizing doing like SEO in order to actually show up on Google?
Yeah, so first step is you need to have a website, and that means a domain plus a hosted site somewhere. This can be free. If you do some research, you can get it up and running on GitHub for free, completely privately. Like, no one needs to know. You just need to pay the $10 a year for a domain, and that's yours. You can even get a .app domain, which is a great way of communicating that your product is an app. And those tend to be a little more free. .com is kind of taken, but .app is a little more available. So that's definitely a mandatory thing that every app should have, is a website that just talks about it. At the very least, it should have some screenshots. It should be a mirror of what the App Store description has, basically. So that way, if people are searching on Google, which is a completely reasonable thing to do, hey, I want to solve this problem, your app has a chance of being in those results.
Right.
Now, the only way for Google to recommend your website versus not recommending it is for other websites to link to it. So if you ever kind of studied how Google works, it basically gives every website a reputation, and if a website with a good reputation links to something, that destination also has a good reputation. And if a website has a bad reputation and it links to something, it decreases the reputation. This is to combat people posting comments on websites with complete spam, basically. Like, you don't want that influencing search results. So they go ahead and have a very complicated algorithm that does all this. But that turns into a presence that people can search for, right? So that is, of course, not the only thing that you should do on your website. If you have more content to share, maybe you have a blog on there where you talk about different things that your app helps solve in different ways. Talk about what your customers do with your app. The more you have on there, the more it will show up in Google for similar search terms and the like. Maybe you have a YouTube video that kind of describes the app and it links to your website. Well, that will help link everything up. And then if someone's on YouTube and they search for something and your app kind of shows up and you have a video that describes either how you made it or what kind of, this is how you can use it to solve a given problem, then that really props everything else up, right?
That's great to know. Yeah, I didn't even think about using something like, YouTube or something similar. And it got me thinking of Paul Solt, who has a YouTube channel, and he's got a bunch of different things on there. He's got tutorials on just, different projects and everything, or, different code related things. I'm kind of drawing a blank. It's been a while since I looked at his channel, but he's got a decent following on there of at least over 1,000 people. And he also has videos on his Brew Coffee app that he's been working on. So I'm sure that would be a great way to get some kind of organic traffic over to his website, and then, obviously to the App Store and just kind of seeing his app. So that's super cool. It seems, I don't know. For me, it seems like, SEO and all that is just this arcane black box that I don't really understand, but it makes sense. I didn't actually know the way that kind of Google ranks things. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, and that's, some people are wondering if that's the reason why search results are getting worse over time, is because no one is sharing results on individual websites anymore. They are now sharing everything on social media platforms, which are all locked down. So Google has no idea about all the links that are on Facebook linking to this or that. So unless someone has a blog where they link to this or that, then that kind of falls apart a little bit. So it's a really important thing, and it's generally a really easy thing to learn a tad about HTML and CSS to make a decent looking and performing website. Host it on something free, and you can get quite a bit of mileage out of it. You don't necessarily need to track everyone who's coming. You can take action off of that, but the mere presence of it is often enough to kind of get things going. So that's something that's really important. Similarly with Twitter, having a Twitter account where you're slowly building an audience, just like you mentioned with the YouTube account. Having anything where you're slowly building an audience is going to prepare you for the next thing that you make, right? You'll have an ever so slightly better chance at getting some momentum. Now, that said, it's not going to make it or break it. You can't say oh, if only I had 50,000 followers, then my product would be a success. And if you've ever listened to Marco Arman on ATP, he will tell you that, hey, those 50,000 followers, they're great for that first day. But then just like your 200 followers, they ignore you the next day. There's not too much benefit from it. But the reason anything Marco makes gains traction is because everyone knows Marco at this point. So people are going to write about it. You're going to have the halo effects on everything else that are going to benefit that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely, just having that, I guess, reputation, right? Of just knowing who they are, knowing they make good stuff. Like, for example, I don't know why I love John Sundell. Like, I think everything he does is awesome. He's made quite a few different open source libraries that I've used, and like any time that he makes something new, like Plot and Ink, I thought were super interesting and also relevant to work with Vapor and stuff. So that was always a plus. But he's got a podcast, he's got a website with a blog, he's got a good Twitter following, and so kind of having that all wrapped into one is pretty cool. And along with that, you've got like mailing lists, right? Like you've got Paul Hudson. I think John Sundell has one too. You've got the like Fernando. I didn't even know that this was a thing, but I went on I think I was just on the Twitter app or just the website. But if you go on Fernando's Twitter page, it's got like
Twitter.com/from junior to senior.
There we go. Yeah. It's got like a subscribe to his newsletter big thing that I haven't ever seen before. And that's just integrated into his Twitter account now. And so if you're like, man, I really love hearing about this person, like having a newsletter is cool because it's like going to be very important information. It's not going to be whatever, tweets or memes that we're all posting. And Fernando's like on a meme rampage right now on Twitter. But like, oh, okay, so if I subscribe to this mailing list, I will get some really good information and it will be relevant. And that's where you could say, oh yeah, look, Fernando has a course, or Fernando in this case has an app that he's working on, and you could go into detail on how the app is going or any challenges or breakthroughs that you've had or whatever to make it interesting. But that would be cool if you've got people that are super interested in what you're doing. I don't know if you'd want to make a mailing list just for your app development or just include it in a part of that. I don't have a mailing list. I've never had one, so I don't really know exactly how you do it, but that's also an interesting way of kind of gaining a very I think that, if you sign up for a mailing list, probably got to be a fairly dedicated follower of a person to let something else bombard your email inbox. At least that's how I view it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can use mailing lists in all sorts of ways on your website. You can have us subscribe to mailing lists. Mm-hmm. And any customers that you get, instead of being Apple's customers at that point, they truly become your customers. They're interested in what you have to tell them about anything new that's coming out. And like the biggest benefit is almost everyone has an email at this point. If they're involved in any sort of technology, they will have an email that you can go ahead and message. Now, that's something that you can put in the app as well. Like, hey, in your about screen, you can say, hey, if you want to hear about new stuff that I make or new stuff that comes to the app, like add your email. And if someone adds their email to that, they are likely going to be a lifetime customer as long as you respect their interests in what you're doing. Now, one thing I hate with mailing lists are mailing lists that will go ahead and just to kind of stay relevant and assume that everyone kind of forgot about what you made already, they will kind of send a weekly email that doesn't say anything. It's just like, hey, we are still here. Now,
yeah,
I surely see the benefit to that, and surely there are people that are absent-minded enough where they will forget you if they haven't seen you in a week. I don't think those are the people that are signing up for mailing lists. Honestly speaking, like I think if someone puts their email in it, in your in your mailing list like entry thing, then they're going to be more than happy to hear about what you have that's new, but they don't want to be bombarded by the same information over and over because it creates a like blindness to anything that's new. So for instance, my email is an absolute catastrophe, not from mailing lists, just of spam in general. Of like mailing lists I did not subscribe for, which is generally how like mailing lists get abused. You buy a list of emails and you add them all to your thing, and then you do the weekly thing, and hopefully something happens. Now, if I subscribe for a mailing list and I see something weekly from them, I am going to very quickly never read any of those emails, nor am I going to do anything. I'm not going to purposely try to unsubscribe. That's a failed attempt in my inbox. I'm just going to ignore it forever. Whereas if I see for the first time in a blue moon something new from Panic, for instance, I will immediately click that, because
Absolutely.
I do read the titles and the senders of every email that comes in. I'm just going to ignore the vast majority of it because it's junk. But if it's something that like, oh, hey, I wonder what they're doing that's different, then I will definitely tap on that email and find out, hey, they're making a play date. How cool is that? Like those sort of interactions are where mailing lists really thrive, rather than the ones where you're just trying to really milk the system and get engagement. I think you're kind of barking up the wrong tree. That may be my personal opinion, but I think your customers are smarter than what a lot of marketing people may say. And yeah, it's a fine line, definitely. You can milk every system and profit generously off of that. Definitely. That's how most companies work. But that tends to work for a big company, because a big company can get away with a certain amount of people hating them. Whereas a small like indie developer, you generally don't want anyone hating you, because you're an individual. And if someone says they hate you, then you're going to be very hurt by that, because you're an individual. There's no one else you can say, oh, it's probably their fault.
Right.
Like that is a direct attack on you. And that can make you never want to make anything anymore. Like that's just the reality of it. So generally I try to steer away from those kind of heavy-handed attempts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems very, and I'm sort of the same mind as you. I think it's, a quality over quantity thing, where you need to make something that's worth people's time. Like you said, you already take the time to look at the sender and subject, but you're not going to open every of your close to 100,000 emails. No, you're just going to take the time.
68,261.
Okay, we're getting there. But if you can, make something good and worth people's time, I think that's good. Another thing is kind of in the same vein, and we've kind of talked about this, is like on a website, I've seen, I don't know what you would call this, I suppose, but it's sort of a conglomerate of maybe you could call it, I don't know if it's a portfolio website, but you've got not just the pages of your apps, but like you said, you've got a blog. And if like Dimitri, for example, is working on this whole thing with collection views. If he decides, you know what, I don't want anyone to go through what I did. I've cracked the code, and he can write about it. That brings traffic to his website in general, but then people might say, wow, this is a super interesting article. Let me also check out the rest of his website. And it's, oh, Dimitri's got this app. Let's, go take a look at that. And I think ultimately kind of what we're trying to say here is, and Dimitri's kind of put this in our notes, is building a business rather than a product, right? Where the product would be just the app, but you're kind of cultivating this business of yourself. I don't know, like if you're an indie developer, if you're just all alone, it's just you don't have a company behind it, but you can build all of these different tools around the product or the app to sort of support and get traction for the app. But it's kind of, it's all set, like it's all self-serving is not the right word. It all kind of feeds into itself, where the app brings people to the blog. Yeah, exactly. It's a feedback loop. The app brings people to the blog brings people to the app, the mailing list, whatever you've got. It's all kind of feeding into itself, and then you probably end up in a much better place much quicker than if you just have one of those things, right? Like if you're just tweeting about your app, like Dimitri said, you'll maybe get that wave. You'll maybe get a second wave when you get an app update, but that's it. But if you've got all of this stuff going around, then that can be easier. And I think it can be sort of what you put into it. Like, for example, I don't really do much on Twitter. I have a couple hundred followers, and I've been on Twitter for like 12 years, but I'm not really trying. You've got other people that have been on for as long as I have, and they've got thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers, and that's great. So I think it really just depends on what you're trying to do. And also just like, for me, being genuine and like being yourself on these different platforms, like don't try so hard that you become a try hard and everyone can see that you're just in it for like, here is my product, please take my product. Like, you're, again, building a presence rather than just kind of hawking your product to people. So whether that comes in the form of making YouTube videos or like the thing that comes to mind is Steve Troughton Smith, where he has a couple apps on the App Store, but like all the time he's talking about whatever, Catalyst and all of these different things. And it's like, it's genuinely a good time to follow him because it's not him just talking about all of his apps, but he'll go into things like all of these, he's got his Pastel app that he's been throwing over to Catalyst or doing some Catalyst stuff. And it's been genuinely interesting to look at like all of this progression and all of these things that he's had to go through in order to get his app out. And then I'm like, wow, I would love to see that in the app. And so it makes me want to kind of check out the app itself. So again, positive feedback loops, like Dimitri said.
Yeah, like I have no use for broadcast radio, but his broadcast app can play internet feeds. One internet feed I listen to semi-regularly is ATP's live stream. So like I use that app for nothing but that. And it's a very nice, simple app for that. So like case in point, I don't follow Steve Troughton Smith for like the apps that he's making necessarily. I follow him because one, he's an acquaintance from like a very long time ago, and two, like I very much enjoy the things that he makes. So I guess that kind of leads into another aspect about like all these social media things is get to know people, like make meaningful relationships at meetups, at conferences, and that's a little hard nowadays, but do try to engage on forums and open source code, like anywhere where you can contribute and network and create a meaningful connection with people. That is going to help you, like somewhat sadly, it's going to help you make more money through your own products, but not for that reason, if that makes any sense. They are legitimately going to want to help you when you make a new app because you are legitimately helping them when they make a new app. Like it's a positive feedback loop that benefits everyone if you look at it from the best light possible. So as Spencer said, you really don't want to milk those opportunities. You don't want to ruin that relationship for no good reason, because it's not about your product in the end. It's about helping each other out more than anything else. So for that reason, like I do want to encourage everyone, like participate in the community as much as you can, whether that's in forums, whether that's in community Slacks. Have a presence for yourself, because if you post and help people often, guess what? People are going to remember who you are. You may have no clue who they are, but they will have seen your little head pop up both here and there, and then they'll see you on Twitter, and they'll be like, oh, that person, let me follow them. I don't even know what they tweet about. And then afterwards, you can realize that they tweet about very horrendous things and unfollow them. But that's a completely separate thing. I'm just kidding. Most people that I've found in these avenues have been completely pleasant to continue following. So jokes aside, like it really is beneficial to network and to build up meaningful relationships with other developers, and that's how you build up your own like fan base in a way, whether they are fans of the products you're making or they're fans of you as a person. They are going to be more willing to kind of help you out when you need that help, right? That's all it comes down to, is when you launch an app, now you need help to get that out there. And the people that are going to help are the people that either care really much about what you made, or care about a past thing that you made, or just want to help you,
Yeah, absolutely. I think a huge thing with that, at least for me, like I remember hearing that exact same advice when I was in my boot camp of like start networking with people, and that scared me so much as an introvert. I was just like, no, I'm good. I can do this on my own. And really, when we say network, it's not like follow everyone that you know on LinkedIn, follow people you don't know on LinkedIn.
No, that's the obnoxious try hard
exactly
method, which
right.
works. Again, you can make anything work by taking it up to level 20 on a scale of 10. So it will work, but you're going to end up with a lopsided, like what's that called on YouTube where you have the thumbs up and the thumbs down and there's like
the ratio?
The ratio, yeah. You're going to have a very lopsided ratio if you take things in one direction versus take things in another. I'm not saying one is faster than the other. Like, you can network politely very quickly by just, like, putting yourself out there. But you can also network very impolitely very quickly. And it's a fine balance to know what is the best way to go about doing that, right?
Yeah.
Like, imagine you're seeing these people in real life. Like the internet should not preclude those methods of holding your stuff back, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you're not going to hand out a business card to literally every single person you see on the street. That's kind of the mass LinkedIn thing. But like Dimitri said, right? Get on some Slacks. There are a bunch of iOS related Slack groups just in general, or I know a lot of places have like location based Slack groups. Like there's a Utah iOS and Mac developer Slack I'm a part of. And if you need an invite, sometimes you need an invite. They're pretty easy to get, but just start following people on Twitter. There's probably, you could probably just find, I don't know. I guess, I don't know how to put this, like common or like well-known developers like Paul Hudson, John Sundell, Steve Troughton-Smith, that kind of thing, and start from there. But like Dimitri said, just like maybe asking a question in a help Slack or a help channel or something gets you out there, and then you can start to have a conversation. And it doesn't have to, again, speaking as an introvert here, it doesn't have to be this scary thing where you're like laying yourself bare to everyone and saying, come at me, like destroy my code. I don't know. Just get to know people in like an organic way. And I think that will, like Dimitri said, have a much greater effect. Maybe you meet less people than if you were mass trying to invite people on LinkedIn. But most of the people I that invite me on LinkedIn, I don't know who they are. They're like not even in the same industry as me. It's, it doesn't really make sense. But on Twitter, a lot of people that I follow, most of the people that I follow are developers in some capacity, generally iOS or Mac. And it's a good time because there's always an interesting conversation on Twitter, and of people looking for jobs. Like lately there have been a bunch of people looking for jobs, or just talking about their code, like Steve Troughton-Smith does, or whatever. But then you go into the comments and you find someone that is also a developer, and you can start following them, and it just kind of is this organic way of growth. And again, I'm not like a poster child for this. Again, I have like 200 followers in 10 years. It's not a good metric, but everyone that I follow is, I think, I know to a certain extent, and I feel like most of them, if I were to put out an app, would be able to, or be willing to, retweet it or favorite it or send it to someone. At least I'd hope. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, that's maybe a little bit optimistic, but I feel like if I had some product or whatever I was trying to get out there, I feel like it would go fairly well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and in a very similar vein to kind of like marketing yourself to market your app, you like the best way that apps kind of reach a presence is by word of mouth, right? You want your app to be something that people can tell others about. You want the name to be easy to remember, so that way they can search for it a little bit later. So think about that as much as possible on how your app can kind of grow organically amongst strangers, ultimately, right? If I find a cool app that's doing something, I'm going to tell Spencer about it if I think it can help him. And users of your app are going to do the same thing, right? So really think about that when you're building your app. Like, don't wait till your app is built and then think about that. Like, if you want your app to succeed as a business and to hopefully make you money, you really need that app to be self-sustaining in some way where it's going to continue to grab users in a way that those users can share it with their friends and it to grow little by little that way. The greatest example of this in the past week has been Wordle. Wordle is not an app, it's a little website kind of thing, but if you've seen little green squares in Twitter, right. You know exactly what that is now because it's kind of taken over very quickly. And it's not because the app is like taking over very quickly. The app does one thing. It lets you play the game, and then at the end there's a share button. And that share button will make you a little piece of text that you can just share on social media. And the fact that that share button exists makes people want to share like how they did on that day's Wordle, because there's only one a day. It's not like something that you can consume to the point of like a burnout, right? You can only do one a day, and then if you forget about the next day, that's that. But chances are you're going to want to play the next one because you're like anticipating it. So there's a lot of pieces in that formula that work for the benefit of humanity. Like you can spin those dials in a very different direction and have someone completely hooked for completely different reasons. But sure. Do think about, again, respecting your customers, because if your customers feel respected, they're gonna help spread the word about your app in a way that's going to help you, right?
Yeah, I think along those lines, and maybe it goes without saying, is if you're going to be putting in all this work, I don't want to, this sounds like super pretentious of me. So like, please don't take it this way. I don't know how to say it very well. You know, if you're going to be going through all this work of making a great, making all of these connections and all that stuff, and being genuine, I think another thing with that is making sure that the product that you have is as best as it can be. Is maybe the best way I can put it. Not saying you need a perfect app, because there will never be a perfect app. And especially if you're only one person, there's only so much you can do. But at the same time, like Dimitri said, he uses Steve Trottensmith's Broadcasts app, and there's like pCalc, and there's all of these great indie apps that are absolutely amazing. They're, top quality. And it's because they, put their heart and soul into it, type of thing. And if you're going to be making a product, I guess what I'm trying to say is make it good. Maybe you are in it for the money, and that's totally cool. But still make a good product, I guess. You don't have to like maybe pour your heart and soul into it if that's not really your thing, I guess. I don't know. I would, but I wouldn't work on an app that I wouldn't want to work on, like as a personal app. But if you're just gonna go through the work of doing all of this networking, connecting with people, and trying to use those connections to help drive people to discover your app, make sure that the app is worth it. Otherwise, I'm not sure I would, for a second time shout out Dimitri's app if the first one sucked, for example.
Yeah, you look at it and be like, I'll retweet it because I'm a close friend, but I'm probably not going to do it again because then it hurts my influence.
Exactly.
Air quotes all over the place with that word.
Yes.
So, yeah, like, I would say the biggest skill that you can nurture as a creator of anything is really learn to identify what is good and what is not. And that is something that is a lot more superfluous than you might think. Like, you might think that, hey, I know exactly like something that's good or something that's not. One of my like favorite ways to determine that if this is actually the case is if you need to ask others if like something is the way you want it or not, then you don't have a good opinion of that thing from that point, fair. If that makes sense. Like, yes, it's completely valid to do market research and see if customers will like something like this or like that. Like, that is sometimes all you have is sort of like how to plow forward in a new industry, for instance. But at the same time, a lot of things don't go that route, and they come from very opinionated minds where it's like, no, I want it to be this way because I think this is better. And if the thing that you think is better is actually better, then it's going to do really well because you have a very constrained, opinionated way of seeing it. Like, you saw that, hey, this is actually better for those reasons. If you create something and you're like, something's missing here, that's an indication that you didn't quite get it yet. And it's something that can still be worked on and improved. And as Spencer said, maybe that's not something that you kind of push as a product, but you push as a creation instead. Like, there's nothing wrong with making something that's unfinished and putting it out there. I mean, everyone has to start from somewhere. The first version of an app that I put out there that received like tons of downloads was a periodic table called Elements. And the first version of that kind of wasn't that great looking, right? At the very least, it stuck to kind of platform norms at the time, but it wasn't doing it in the best way that it could. And over many, many years, I kind of got better at noticing, okay, this wasn't good for this reason, not for that reason. And iterating on that process to the point where at this point, I feel very confident when I say, oh, this is good for these reasons and this is not good for those reasons. And there's a better solution to be found. It's not something that came immediately that I was just born with, right? It's something that I had to work hard at. But at the same time, I wasn't necessarily saying very early on, hey, everyone, look at this amazing thing. It's better than anything, when it wasn't necessarily. Does that make sense? Like, there's a time and place to feel confident and to know when you need to either ask for opinions or to improve or to learn how to identify. Like, that's probably a ton of information that's not going in any one direction that anyone would like be able to follow. But it is definitely a skill hard earned to be able to identify what is good and what is bad in terms of all sorts of things, design, but also business practices. Like, you have to, or even communication and networking, right? Not everyone is good at communicating and networking, and oftentimes when you're not, you look at someone who is and you just say like, well, if only I were extroverted, then that would be good. They worked at that at some capacity. Absolutely. You know, it's not something that came on its own. Like, I up until I would say somewhat recently was afraid of talking to people. Like, I would just not want to do it because of like this or that reason. And it's until you practice talking to people that it becomes easier or harder, right? And you won't succeed all the time, but you got to practice things, and you got to know when you're good at something and not. And yes, some people will think that they're very good at something when they're not, and that's unfortunate. But the more you kind of practice, the more that kind of opinion will change over time, and you'll be able to tell when you're actually should be confident about something and when you should hold back a little bit and accept criticism or accept recommendations for how to improve things. And in either scenario, if someone has something to say about it, listen patiently. Like, there's a reason someone's saying that. They might not have the solution, even if they think they do. But them telling you about something that's wrong with anything that you're doing, like, there's all sorts of reasons why they are doing that. And there's probably a good one hidden somewhere at one level or another, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like anything, it takes practice, like you said. I mean, think back to the first time that you had to set up a table view. It's probably super hard. Now you can do it in your sleep, type of thing. So
yeah.
And the best part about what we're into as software developers is you always can update your app. It's not like you have a physical product that you messed up and now you've wasted
that people framed
hundreds
on
of
$1,000.
$1,000.
You're stuck with.
Yeah, you just say, "Oh shoot! All right, let me push that up to App Store Connect and pass through review, and there you go. You've got a solution, or you've made it better, at least hopefully." So again, that's why I didn't want to sound pretentious, but when I said make it the best that it can be, maybe that's the best you can do for now, and that's fine. But maybe a couple months down the line, you get some feedback and you say, oh, well, now I can do better. And you can release that. And it's all this, continual process of doing the best you can. And I don't know, for me, it's being as genuine as you can with kind of your audience and not trying to cram stuff down their throats. Because like we've kind of talked about, no one likes, an annoying mail list or people that only tweet about their app or whatever.
Yeah, definitely respect your audience, because
Yeah.
they have the power to ignore you completely, and they are being very generous giving you their attention. So I think a funny side effect of this is YouTube videos. If you've never kind of noticed, YouTube videos are almost all 10 minutes, and that's like a very particular number. Like, why is every video 10 minutes? And you start to realize that the whole way a YouTuber can make a living being a YouTuber is if their videos are 10 minutes. So if they have 3 sentences to share with you, they're going to pad that to the point where it's going to like take up 10 minutes. And that's the reality of it. And it's kind of unfortunate. And like, not everyone is a sheeple, and they will start to notice that. And anyone who has been making 10 like videos that are only 10 minutes but don't share anything, I don't watch.
Yeah.
Like I have very quickly learned how to filter that and not notice it anymore, because it is not beneficial to me to spend 10 minutes to get 3 sentences of information. However, videos that are 40 minutes talking about laundry detergent, I will watch the hell out of, because that is crammed full of information. Like, they try to get it down to 40 minutes, if that makes any sense. And I feel very respected by that, and I will consume all of their videos over the course of 2 months, back 5 years. So again, respect the people that are giving you their attention, because they are choosing to give you that attention. And yeah, I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, no, it's super true. One YouTuber that, this is kind of a tangent, but one YouTuber that Dimitri got me onto is Ben Eater, where he has 2 or 3 videos on. Well, he does amazing things with, building a computer on a breadboard. But the one that I started watching last weekend was building a graphics card on a breadboard, and it was amazing. And it was 35, 40 minutes long, the first video, but he went into detail. And like you said, that he had to script this out, and there was stuff that he had to cut to make it even like less than 2 hours.
And he's not rushing to deliver the information either. He's taking his time, so that way you, the listener, can follow along with it. Because if he rushes, then you're lost. Like, it's so detailed that it's very important that he delivers in the way that he does. So highly
super
recommend
cool.
that channel.
Yeah, he goes, like, his building a computer thing goes into clock cycles, and he uses this module that has a piece of quartz that resonates at a certain frequency to give him an exact clock. And I was like, this is amazing. Computers on their own are amazing. He's making transistors that are huge, but effectively it's the same thing that you have in your computer, just shrunken or blown up many, 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 many times. So really cool. Anyway,
and the one
there, but super cool.
The one on, it wasn't laundry detergent, it was dishwasher detergent, that I fell into that rabbit hole of a channel. It's called Technology Connections, and that is absolutely great. And it turns out I remember particular videos I watched like ages ago on like toasters, and the fact that nugget of information stayed in my mind as a testament to, even though I didn't follow that, like I watched one video many years ago, like I remember that to this day in a way, and it stuck with me because it was legitimately interesting. And that's the product that person, I don't know his name unfortunately, is like building. They are building interesting videos, and it's not YouTube that's making them money. Probably it's their Patreon, because they have a very long list of people that are very supportive of the work they're doing. Right?
Yeah, for sure. It's that community again. The whole thing is just, building an audience of maybe not like-minded people, but people that share your interests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I guess the very last thing you can do to market your app, which we didn't even mention up until now, is advertising. Right. Advertising can either work or fail spectacularly. I've advertised like some apps in other apps. But there's an interesting problem with that. If someone is using a free to download app and they're okay with advertising, they're probably not okay with paying for apps. if that vicious cycle kind of exists.
Yeah.
However, if you have an app that is free to download and that has advertising, you can totally advertise that on other apps that are free to download that have advertising, because people might be interested in downloading that, right? So it's a very fine line and very hard to kind of get well. I've seen advertising that has done nothing, and I've seen advertising that kind of worked. One example of advertising that has worked is advertising this podcast on Overcast, for instance. Turns out having a place for an ad that is directly connected to people listening to podcasts works very well for podcasts, and helps grow. Yeah, who'd have thought? And again, you're not forcing anything on anyone. They can choose to ignore you, or they can think that it's interesting and therefore give it a try. And if you did, hello, welcome. Hope you enjoyed the show so far. But at the same time, like, advertising has just not worked. So that's why I hesitate to even mention it as like something you should do as an individual that is just trying to get people to know about your app. Yes, you can advertise on Facebook, you can advertise on Google, you can advertise all over the place. But it's not necessarily always going to work out for you, and it's worth trying if you have the financial means to do so. But don't use that as your primary method of gaining a new audience, because it's not always going to work.
Yep, 100% agree. I think growing it in a more organic way, though perhaps slower, like we talked about, is probably ultimately going to be a more stable way of gaining revenue, if you're going for revenue or just users. Either way, I don't know. Advertising is weird, and again, that's so not my thing that I've not even really tried to look into it much at all. So, but I know for me, ads don't really work too often. So unless it's a good product, like there have been some of the sponsors on here, and also some of the indie app spotlights that have been awesome, and I've ended up downloading them, right? So sometimes it works, but just kind of I guess shotgun blasting it out to like the world on Facebook or whatever may work. I mean, I don't really know how targeted their stuff can get. Probably actually pretty targeted with Facebook. That's maybe not a great example, but I don't know. It is what it is.
I would say any automated system is probably going to fail spectacularly. If you can find an audience that you want to sponsor in some way and talk directly to that audience, it's going to work out a lot better, because that audience will be able to connect with it to a certain extent. So it's definitely the hardest of all of these, but it is absolutely necessary. Like, Apple would not be who they are today if they didn't spend a lot of money on advertising. And part of that comes from them repeatedly advertising. You can't advertise once and hope for that to work. You need to have something where you are constantly reminding someone in the back of their head that you exist. And notice, this is not people that are explicitly following you. This is an audience that has no idea who you are. So it's a very different attack vector in a way that you need to prepare for and be able to implement well. And I can't say I'm an expert of it. I'm still trying to figure it out. And at the same time, I don't want to do it in a way that's going to disrespect my future users either. So it's always a very fine line. So on that fine note, this week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Sticky Widgets. Sticky Widgets is the absolute easiest way to put a sticky note on your home screen and edit it quickly. It's so easy, you never need to open the app itself. Add a sticky widget to your home screen through the iOS home screen editor and tap on it to edit. That's about it. Of course, there's tons of customization options as well: font, color, text size, alignment, all conveniently located in the system's edit widget interface. Add as many sticky widgets as you'd like, or put them all in a smart stack. Sticky widgets are digital sticky notes for your phone. Use them however you'd like. Sticky Widgets is free to download on the App Store, and additional font and color options are available for a one-time in-app purchase. Thank you so much to Sticky Widgets for sponsoring Code Completion. Check out Sticky Widgets on the iOS App Store today. And on a completely different note, if you make apps and you want us to talk about it, you can just let us know. We have a segment we call Indie App Spotlight, where we are happy to kind of promote indie developers, because who else is going to help you, right? We have to help support each other, and that's also one of the reasons why we started this podcast. Because if we ever want to make something, we are slowly building up, hopefully, something that can help us like share what we've made, right? Because if you just act in isolation, then you will be isolated forever in that regard. So if you need help promoting an app, we will happily share it with our audience. I'm not going to share like super spammy things. I've seen super spammy things and I just ignored them, because not an indie developer that's trying to respect their audience, and that's therefore not respecting our audience. But if you do make something that seems neat, and there might be someone from that listens to us that might be interested in it, I'm happy to share it. Similarly, if you want to sponsor the show and get a more direct kind of presence in what we're talking about, then like that is totally fine as well. But we are more than happy to promote indie developers completely for free. So again, just reach out and we are happy to kind of take that conversation forward. Now, that leads into our mini review corner, where we talk about more stuff. And I'll start it off with a little story. So over the holidays, I went over to my parents' house for Christmas, and or was it New Year's? I don't know. It was one of them. And I had with me my Switch, and I had with me those super nostalgic Nintendo 64 controllers that you can connect to the Switch via Bluetooth. And I had with me Mario Kart 64, which was something that we all played when I was a child, basically. And everyone got frustrated over it, because like, if you know how to drive a car, that's not going to help you with Mario Kart 64. So I got everything in my bag. I had a little dongle that I used to use for traveling, so I don't have to bring the whole dock. And I tried to hook it up to the TV, and nothing was working. And I was frankly like a little frustrated by that whole thing. Now, I didn't want to test it too much, because I am well aware that third-party dongles are not licensed by Nintendo, and no such device exists that is licensed by Nintendo. And they are very noteworthy in that they can brick systems. And almost every one of these products on Amazon has a sequence of 1-star reviews where it has bricked their Nintendo Switch and made it impossible for them to charge it, and then it eventually died. So that is no good. So I didn't want to test it too far, and ultimately we didn't get to play Mario Kart on the TV like that, and we had to play in the little itty-bitty Switch screen. And that was still fun, but more frustrating than anything, especially when you're playing 4-player Mario Kart on an itty-bitty screen. Yeah, like, it was made for like CRTs that were at least a little bigger. So that was a little bit of a bummer. But as soon as I got home, I wanted to do research into finding a better kind of a new dongle, because my dongle obviously broke, even though it was like working just fine for a few years, ever since I had my Switch, basically. So I start looking on Amazon, and quickly I'm horrified by like all the 1-star reviews. I don't want to like tempt that fate. So I do research, and I come across a post on Reddit where someone goes into all the details as to why things are failing, and why systems are being bricked. And one of the things they mention at the very end is, the reason I know all this is because I've been trying to develop a system that's not going to brick your Switch. And it is called the Genki Covert Dock. So that's the product that they were building, and they didn't want to brick Switch systems, so they put the research into it, and they put the effort into sharing that research with people, which is a great marketing like avenue, because now I have more trust for your product than all the products that are on Amazon full of reviews. Like, there's no like visible negative reviews for this, but as a result, I trust them more because they went into the details as to why other products may be breaking Switches. So what is this little thing? Well, it's a little power charger, and I can open it up here. So, comes with a little manual, a fun little Nintendo themed sticker, and a cable, which is important. I'll get to it. But ultimately, it's this little power charger. Plug it into the wall. And on the other end, you have a USB. I think it's upside down. You have a USB-C for your Switch. You have a USB dongle for anything that your Switch might need to connect to, network, wired controller, yada yada. And then you have a HDMI out, which is from the DisplayPort signal that's coming from your Switch. Now, this is a gallium nitride charger, so it's like really tiny and still supplies 30 watts or whatever it needs to. And it does the DisplayPort decoupling. And I trust it because they went into the details, and I'm not a dummy, and they put in a little bit more effort than like, oh, trust us, this won't break. No, they went into, so the reason why it's breaking is because a lot of these power supply, or a lot of these adapters don't implement power delivery correctly, and when the Switch asks for 6 volts, it gives them 15 volts, and that's no good over a long period of time, kind of thing. So this is a particular chip that's frying. It's because it's getting too much voltage. If you look at these graphs on an oscilloscope, yada, yada, yada. So I was very convinced by that amount of research that went into it, and therefore I was more willing to trust them than anyone else. And this is the results of this. Some big YouTubers have kind of tried it and done reviews about it. So I did do a little bit more research, of course. The only downside seems to be that it doesn't treat color in the exact same way as the original Switch dock, which does not matter if you're traveling on someone's TV that's not calibrated anyway. So I am not super bothered by that. But yeah, that's what it is. It's a really tiny little thing. Neat thing about this is not like you don't have to bring a power adapter as well as your little dongle. You can just kind of bring this. It has the power adapter in it. You just need to figure out an HDMI cable, which you can generally unplug from something else, and bring the supplied USB-C cable, which you do need. You need a USB-C 3.1 cable that will be able to supply. There's very importantly a resistor in the cable, which helps the Switch not consume too much power when it doesn't need to, but also can supply the video data back out at the same time. So that's one of the necessary components. But other than that, guess what? Since it uses the proper power delivery standards, it will also work with your computer and your iPad and your Android phone. I don't know if iPhones are not USB-C, so that won't work. But all those other devices, like you can get HDMI 4K out of your iPad with this, which is super cool.
Nice. Real quick, I want to hijack this for a bonus round of of the mini review corner. Awesome. I have not really a similar product, but I also remember when I first bought my Switch that docks were coming out and all that, and breaking switches, and so I also wanted a portable kind of replacement for the dock. The dock is just huge, and so what I came up with was they'll sell these little cases on Amazon where you can take apart the original dock, and because the PCB is about this big, and so what I have tiny. Is this, which is the original PCB with just a little ribbon cable to a new USB-C port, but going into the original dock, much smaller and a lot more portable. So that's what I use myself.
And basically licensed by Nintendo, unless you really screwed something up, putting in a piece of plastic and screwing it's just a screw that's holding it shut, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was less than $10 or something on Amazon. So, and what I did was it was pretty new into like the Switch, 2017 or something when I did this, and I wasn't 100% sure. I didn't want to break my dock, but I found a used dock on my local classifieds for like $20 or something, which is a steal. I think Nintendo was selling it for like $70 or something.
$80 still is. It's still unavailable.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. There we go. So I found it for like $25. And it was just like in this dude's trunk. And I was like, okay, cool. And I took apart that one. It works fine. So now I have two. I have the original and I have this one, but this is the one I use because it's just super small. So I didn't mean to totally hijack that, but what I like about yours is it's just plugs right into the wall, and all you need are two cables. That's super nice. So
Yeah, that's one of the downsides of like your method. One, you have to be able to get an official dock, which are not available
Yeah.
anywhere. On Amazon,
Yeah.
they're like guilt tripping you with a $140 purchase, and then the Nintendo Store, which, funnily enough, the local CDN just like does not work with my address, so I cannot access store.nintendo.com from my home address. I have to go into cellular, so I get a different CDN. Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, very cryptic errors as well. Until I like looked up what the error meant. It's like Cloud Guru meditation. I'm like, what on earth is this? This is not Nintendo. But it turns out it's like some Cloudflare CDN like Edge server that's just dead, that no one knows about. It's been dead for months. But that's the one that my DNS connects me to, so I'm out of luck for store.nintendo.com unless I go on cellular, and then I get a very different CDN. But needless to say, I was going to go your route because I was like, I don't want to trust any of these guys. And I just couldn't find a dock. So that's where I found this. And the benefit is you don't have to carry around an extra charger, which is always like, I always generally used an Apple charger, like either a laptop one or an iPad one, which like generally is going to work fine because it implements power delivery correctly. But those little dongles, they don't implement power delivery correctly. So even if your charger says, oh, we can supply these voltages, and it's up to the Switch to pick one, the little dongle's like, oh, just pick the second one. And the second one is way too high powered or whatever. And that's generally what brick systems. So thankfully my chargers have never done the damage yet. But it's always been like very scary trying. And I'm very happy to support people that do the research and put in the work to share that research, because they don't have to share it. It's basically letting everyone else know how to do it properly, right? But because they put that effort in, like, it's a very poisoned market, to say the least. So they have to put that effort in if they want to gain new customers. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, it's very fitting that you talked about Mario Kart 64, as this is our 64th episode.
Oh. Very fitting indeed. The Nintendo 64 emulator on Switch sucks. Anyways.
This is true.
Anyways, as always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter at CodeCompletion to know when new episodes get released, and feel free to tweet at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with all your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we want to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis. That's SpencerCurtis on Twitter, for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñuel. That's DimitriBouniol, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye. So yeah, Nintendo 64 emulator and Switch sucks.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know, like, why. It seems like it's not just for some games, it's like for all games, and it's just
it sucks,
mediocre.
Dude. I know. It's such a bummer, too, because there are open source emulators that run things fine.
Mm-hmm. And it's especially a bummer when Nintendo has like emulators for their games that run perfectly well. I'm looking at the GameCube release of Ocarina of Time, for instance. Like,
right, yeah.
After I got rid of my Nintendo 64 and all I had was a GameCube, I loved that version because that's the only version I had, and that version works great. It's like one of the best emulators. And then every year since then, it gets worse and worse, it seems, with the Wii and then the Wii U one and now the Nintendo Switch one. So, come on, Nintendo. People are paying monthly for this.
I know, and that's the worst part, too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like... They're so greedy, dude. I don't know. They're so gnarly about, I don't know, streaming content and just using any IP at all, and then they don't put in the work to, make it easy for people to get those games or anything. And then that's why they're so anal about piracy, because people have to do it to play those games. It's like, dude, even if you've got the cartridge chilling in, in your closet or whatever, there's like no way for you to play the game if you don't have the original console.
Mm-hmm. Except if you get so I think a company called Analog makes this. What was their Game Boy remake?
The Pocket.
The Analog Pocket, right? So for if you don't know, this is a Game Boy remake. So it's an FPGA internally that just simulates the Game Boy's CPUs, CPU and auxiliary chips. And when I say like simulates, it rebuilds the same circuitry that the Game Boy had, because it's been long enough and it's not that fancy of a chip that we know exactly how it works. So they were able to put in that work and make a brand new device that is modern in every way. Like, you don't need to put double A's in it, I don't think. It's
got like
capable.
an OLED screen.
Yeah, you put a cartridge in it and it will play that game as if it were connected to an original Game Boy. So thank goodness people are making products like these, because that is what kind of preserves all this older like culture in a way. Especially since copyright law is completely broken and none of those games will enter into public domain anytime soon. So you have to play them on cartridge if you want to play them legitimately. And this is a way of doing that. So that, I think, is quite cool.
I don't know how they do it. I haven't really looked into like the legality of that, but like, it's crazy to me that Nintendo is letting, like, being okay with them building an FPGA that, runs the games directly. If, the console itself, I don't know.
It's the same reason that they can't do anything about the Ocarina of Time, like, what's that project called? The decompilation project. So basically, they are writing brand new source from scratch. Like, that's how it works. And it so happens that if you take all the assets from a legitimate ROM and include the compiled code, you get an exact replica of the cartridge.
That's crazy.
That, like, they are not providing a ROM. They are providing source code, and they are not providing the assets. So they own the copyright to their source code, and it just so happens that it's generating the same, like, results.
Output,
right?
Yeah. Crazy.
And Nintendo can't legally do anything about that, unfortunately, for them. But it's not like it's a minor amount of effort. It is not by any means a minor amount of effort. So they completely deserve, like, the ability to continue doing that from like any law. I honestly believe.
Yeah, I agree.
I am also a proponent that copyright law has, like, way overstayed its welcome. Like, it started off as being something completely reasonable, and it has quickly become something that benefits corporations and not individual people that are inventing things. For instance, Winnie the Pooh has very recently, like as of a few days ago, entered the public domain. But Winnie the Pooh with a red shirt, that's owned by Disney. That one is never going to enter the public domain for the foreseeable future. But the Winnie the Pooh without the red shirt, totally A-okay. Which I find hilarious. So people are making jokes about that specifically. And I honestly believe that Disney deserves to be dragged through the dirt for kind of making copyright law as it is worse, because it's basically Disney that caused this problem.
I was just gonna say Disney are the biggest proponent of
and music labels and all that. Like, giant corporations are the ones that our copyright law is completely broken. I'd be totally A-okay if Elements entered the public domain, because I have not done anything with it for many years. Like, it's just, if it had to enter the public domain, then I'd be like, okay, fine. Like, I can't do anything about that. If I was continuing making, like, money off of it, then yeah, give me 10, 15 years to, like, own that. But then if someone wanted to just steal that idea after that point, like, I had my chance. That's honestly my opinion.
That's fair.
It's a little backwards, but I think that one day maybe it'll be fixed, or it will be worse, and no one will be none the wiser, right?
Yep.